It is minus 14 outside. The wind is cutting across an open Montana field at 40 miles an hour. And a 61-year-old retired iron worker is sleeping soundly behind a corrugated steel wall he built with his own hands for $600. His heating bill last month was $9. He has not had a mortgage payment in 4 years. Most people drive past his property and think it is a storage shed. They are wrong. What actually happens inside that steel arch every single day, the good, the brutal, and the parts of 5-minute build videos deliberately skip over, is nothing like what you have been told. And by the end of this, you will understand exactly why thousands of ordinary men across this country are quietly walking away from rent mortgages and 30-year debt cycles and building their own shelter for less than the cost of a used transmission. But first, you need to know where this thing actually came from. It is the winter of 1941. America has just entered World War II. The military has a problem so simple, it is almost embarrassing. They need to put a roof over hundreds of thousands of soldiers, fast, in places where there is no lumber, no skilled crew, no crane, and sometimes no flat ground. Canvas tents are failing in the Pacific. Men are freezing in the North Atlantic. The clock is running. The Navy sends a team of engineers to a facility called Quonset Point in Rhode Island. The brief is brutally clear. Build something any enlisted man with zero construction experience can put up in a single day, ship anywhere on the planet in a crate, and survive whatever the earth throws at it. What they design is a half-cylinder of corrugated steel mounted on a prefabricated base, with numbered arches that lock together in sequence from one end to the other. No foundation, no framing, no heavy equipment. The entire structure is standing within hours. They call it the Quonset hut. By the time the war ends, the military has put up more than 150,000 of them on every continent on Earth. Soldiers sleep in them in the jungles of the Philippines, in the Sahara, on frozen ridgelines in the Aleutian Islands where the wind alone can kill a man. When the war is over, the government sells the surplus off for a few $100s apiece. Farmers buy them. Churches buy them. Families who cannot afford the post-war housing boom move their kids in. A generation of American men grows up inside curved steel walls and considers it completely normal. Then the suburbs arrive, and the Quonset disappears from the cultural memory. Until now. So, what is it actually like to wake up inside one? The first thing you notice is the sound. Rain on a Quonset roof is not the soft patter you hear on shingles. It is a percussion instrument. Every drop hits corrugated steel, and the ridges amplify each one into a sharp crack. And when a real storm moves in, the whole shell rings. Some men love it. Others say it takes weeks to adapt. Nobody calls it quiet. Morning light does not enter from above. It comes into the flat gable ends, the wooden end walls that close off each side of the cylinder. A window placed in the east gable turns sunrise into a horizontal beam that fills the entire interior. And because the curved ceiling reflects that light inward instead of absorbing it, the whole space glows. You do not wake up reaching for a lamp. The structure does it for you. Temperature is where most first-time builders get caught off guard. In a Quonset, warm air rises into the arch and sits there. The floor stays cold. If you do not have a small ceiling fan pushing the heat back down, you are essentially heating the top 18 inches of your cabin and sleeping in the cold zone. This is fixable, and it costs $30. But nobody tells you until you spend your first winter figuring it out. Here is a bigger truth that the build videos gloss over in 30 seconds or skip entirely. An uninsulated Quonset is not a home. It is a refrigerator in February and a cast iron skillet in July. The $600 figure gets you the steel shell. The insulation is a completely separate conversation, and skipping it is not an option. Spray foam applied to the inside of the arch is the most effective solution. It is also permanent and adds cost. Rigid foam board panels cut to fit the curve are cheaper, but cutting curved panels by hand tests your patience. Some builders hang fabric liners from the ridge beam and create a dead air gap that works as a basic thermal barrier. Every one of these methods works. None of them is perfect. All of them are mandatory. Here is what nobody says until you get inside a finished, insulated Quonset. It does not feel small. A 14 by 24-foot build gives you 336 square feet of floor space with zero interior load-bearing walls. You put the kitchen where you want it. The sleeping loft goes wherever you decide. There is no structural engineer telling you what you cannot move, and the curved ceiling draws the eye upward in a way that makes every square foot feel bigger than it is. But stay with me, because there are things about living in one that will genuinely surprise you, and not all of them are good. The curved walls are the first lesson. Anything you hang on them must be freestanding or ceiling mounted. A bookshelf pushed against the curve leans. A picture frame sits flush only at the very bottom of the arch, where the wall is nearly vertical. You adapt fast, but if you walk and expect to furnish it like a rectangular room, you will waste a weekend rearranging things you should have measured first. Condensation is the quiet enemy of every steel building, and a Quonset is no different. On cold mornings, warm interior air migrates toward the cold steel skin and beads up. If your vapor barrier has a gap, even a small one, that moisture runs and drips. Men who have dealt with it describe waking up to puddles on the floor traced back to a crack in the insulation no bigger than a playing card. Fix the gap and it stops. Ignore it, and you have a rust problem inside of 3 years. The gable ends, the flat wooden frames on each side, are where your door, your windows, and your ventilation live. A well-built gable end with proper ceiling and double-pane glass makes the interior stable and quiet. A rushed gable end leaks air in winter, heat in summer, and eventually water in both. Most build failures in Quonset cabins do not start in steel. They start in the wood. One more thing the promotional content skips. A Quonset is acoustically live. Sound bounces off curved steel the way it does not in a rectangular room. Voices carry further. Music is genuinely good in there. But every drop pan, every hour of heavy rain, every gust that catches a steel and makes it ping against the fasteners, all of it registers. Most men who have lived in one for a full season stop noticing entirely. Now, the part of this video that actually changes the math for most people watching. A half acre of rural land in most states outside the coastal markets can still be bought for $10,000 to $20,000. A Quonset shell kit for a livable build runs $600 to $3,000, depending on size and gauge of steel. Insulation, gable framing, a solid door, a pair of windows, and basic electrical bring the total to somewhere between $4,000 and $12,000 for a man willing to do the work himself across a few weekends. In a country where median rent now exceeds $1,500 a month in most metro areas, that arithmetic changes lives. The build itself requires no prior experience. The arches are numbered. The hardware is included. You read the sequence, you follow it, and you do not skip the step where you torque the base anchors tight before you start raising panels. That is the most common first-time mistake, and it causes the upper panels to gap at the seams and the whole structure to look slightly off-plumb. Men who have built 2 of them say the second goes up in half the time. There is a moment every man who finishes his first Quonset build describes the same way. He stands inside the empty arch, looks up at the curve, and feels something he did not expect. It is not pride exactly. It is closer to disbelief. The disbelief of realizing that something he spent years believing required professionals and permits turned out to require a free weekend and a numbered instruction sheet. And here's the thing that does not show up in any build video. Once a man has built his own shelter, the relationship he has with cost changes permanently. When your housing overhead is under $200 a month, including the land note, everything else in your financial life reorganizes. Men describe leaving jobs they had stayed in out of fear for years. Starting a small business they told themselves they could not afford a risk. Having the honest conversations about money they had postponed for a decade because there was finally enough margin to survive being honest. Now, before we go any further, I want to speak directly to the men watching this who are not here out of curiosity. Some of you are here because rent went up for the 4th time in 3 years and the math no longer works. Some of you have rural land sitting empty that you inherited and never knew what to do with. Some of you are veterans who came home and discovered that the country that shipped you overseas has made it close to impossible to afford a stable place to come back to. More than 30,000 American veterans are without stable housing on any given night. The VA has programs, but navigating them burns time that men in crisis do not have. That is why we assemble a resource called the Veterans Blueprint. It walks through emergency housing programs, lesser-known assistance strategies, and step-by-step guidance for men on the edge. Some of what is in there cannot be said out loud on this platform. We put where no algorithm can reach it. The link is in the description. If you need it or know someone who does, it is there right now. So, what do men who have actually lived in a Quonset for more than a year say about it? Almost every one of them lands on the same three things. The first is the quiet, not silence. The particular quiet of a structure that shares walls with no one. After years of apartment living, the absence of the neighbor above, the argument to the wall at midnight, and the building corridor noise is not subtle. Men describe it as a physical unwinding that takes 2 to 3 weeks to complete. The shoulders come down. The sleep deepens. The body stops bracing. The second is what they call maintenance honesty. A Quonset does not conceal its problems behind drywall and drop ceilings the way a conventional house does. If a seam is gapping, you see it. If moisture is entering, you find it fast. Men who have owned conventional homes and made the switch say the transparency feels strange at first and then becomes one of the things they trust most about the building. The third is the cost reset. When housing overhead drops below $200 a month, a man's entire relationship to work, risk, and money shifts. The job he was keeping out of fear becomes optional. This is not theory. It is what men who have made this move report consistently across hundreds of accounts from builders all over the country. The criticism of Quonset cabins as permanent housing is legitimate, and it deserves a straight answer. A steel building without proper insulation and vapor control will fail within a few years. The galvanized skin rusts where it is scratched, and in humid climates, it happens faster than most buyers expect. Many counties have zoning codes that prohibit steel arch structures as primary residences, and discovering this after you have already bought the kit is a lesson that fills entire forum threads. The resale market is thin because no bank will mortgage a Quonset, which means most buyers cannot finance the purchase of one. The men who make them work almost always own the land outright, because the equity lives in the ground, not the arch. The strongest advocates for Quonset living say the same thing without hesitation. This is not the answer to how do I build real estate wealth. It is the answer to how do I get a solid, warm, dry roof over my head right now, on land I own, with money I actually have, without asking permission from a bank for that specific question. It remains one of the most direct answers available in this country. There is one image that appears across every online Quonset community, posted over and over in different locations and different seasons. A small steel arch in a field, a wood stove pipe through the gable, a garden patch started along the south wall, and underneath every version of that photograph, the same comment, posted by men who have never picked up a bolt gun in their lives. How do I start? The men who answer are not contractors or architects. They are retired tradesmen, veterans, nurses who drove too far to commute, and men who ran the numbers on conventional life and decided to run different numbers instead. What they found was a design 80 years old, tested by the worst conditions a world war could produce, and still available for less than the price of a used riding mower. The Quonset cabin is not a perfect home. It is a steel arch with a door in it. It is loud in rain. It demands proper insulation, or it punishes you. It does not care what the property listings say it is worth. But inside it are the things that make any structure worth building. A roof that handles whatever the sky sends down. Walls that hold heat against a 14 below night. A door that belongs to the man who bolted it in himself. Think back to the iron worker asleep in his Montana field, while the wind runs at 40 miles an hour outside his $600 shell. No granite countertops. No attached garage. No straight wall to push a bookshelf against. By every measure the housing market uses, it barely qualifies, and yet inside that curve are the only things a man truly needs. Warmth, weather stopped at the threshold, a door he built, and outside it, a morning that belongs entirely to him. The distance between financial impossibility and a life on your own terms can be 24 feet wide, bolted together in a weekend, for the price of a plane ticket. Let me know in the comments if you found this helpful, and subscribe for more videos about how to survive cold winters.